recording and start streaming. Give that a second. Give me 1 second. I'm sure people are watching already. We're here with Ilze and Carl, and it's the 17th of October 2019, and we're going to be talking about their new film project, Limerence, and all their exciting projects that they've been working on, and how we got there. So thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you. It's very exciting.
So first of all, I guess, how did this project come about? What was the instigator? What brought you here?
I mean, I think it's a pretty long story because the first very, very original idea for the kind of story I had when I was a teenager, I wanted to write it as a novel first, and I just put it aside and just kind of left it there. And then we've been making films for like 3 years now, and I kept thinking back about this idea that I would still want to make it, and because it's such a big and ambitious film, it's our first feature film. We wanted to make sure that we make some short films first, that we get a nice crew, we have a team, and we have this experience to actually start thinking about a feature film. And then finally now we met enough filmmakers who could help us bring it to life, and then we realized that we can definitely make it now.
So before we talk about this film, tell me a little bit about the short films that you've worked on in the past.
Yeah, so I started making films by myself, and when I was just living back in my home country, Latvia, I was just making little short films with my friends and family. And so were you, I think, just making some...
Yeah, just with my friends, just on weekends, making like 5-minute long videos.
When we met, we made our very first little film called Behind the Clouds, which was, again, just a very little weekend little project with some uni friends. And it was our first attempt at making a little film together. And then our first proper short film was called Bus Stop. It was something I did as my university graduation project, and Carl was part of it as well. And it got our first festival selection. It was very exciting. And soon after, we did Promise.
Yeah, which was the one I wrote.
Yeah, so that was Carl's script and he produced it. So that was our second film, and we got 3 festival selections for that. And then soon we worked on another project where we found lots of people who we wanted to work with in the future, and we filmed our 3rd short film, Sunset. Yeah. That was your script as well.
Yeah, mine as well.
And that's currently in festivals, so it's not available for public just yet. And then our most recent project was our most ambitious film so far, which was a 40-minute film, which was called Quadratura, which is an experimental drama, and it was a very big, ambitious project, which was like the stepping point from like short films to something much bigger. It was the first film where we had such a big crew and cast and big sets, and it's also still submitted in festivals, but it already has won one short film festival at Pinewood Studios. Yeah, and we actually were in the Pinewood Studios yesterday for our little private screening, which was earned from this film, so it was very exciting.
Brilliant. And so that brings us up to date, and So the feature-length film that you're working on now, as you're saying, came from an acorn of an idea when you were quite young. Tell me a little bit about that. Has it changed much? How did it develop into what it is today?
Yeah, it definitely has changed a lot, because the very first original idea I had was just about a story about a girl who finds some kind of powerful book where she writes things that she wants in her life, and because she wants love in her life, and just she describes these things that she wants to have this love, and they come to life. And it was just very vague, very brief like that. And then at the end of last year, we were developing this idea together. We took lots of inspiration from old traditional European folk tales, mainly German folk tales and fairy tales, like from Brothers Grimm, and And so we developed this into an actual idea for a script, and we worked with that for a while. But then even from that, it changed a lot in the last few months, and we just narrowed it down. We decided to concentrate more on the inner feelings. It's a lot about mental health and about your own fears and dreams, and so it started as a much more bigger fantasy film about fantasy creatures and fantasy worlds, and now it's more closed down, more concentrating on like personal stories and this one girl's journey on so, which I think will make it a bit more easy to maybe relate to, or just easy to understand, because we're looking at a very specific person's journey.
So yeah, making it more accessible to those that may not necessarily be interested in that genre, or
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and at what point did you decide that this was going to be your this was going to be a big project? Had that always been the plan, or was it going to be a short film? What brought you to doing it as a feature length?
I think we always thought this was going to be a feature film, because we originally wrote the script together.
Yeah. Usually based on this idea.
Yeah, it was a bit of a different story, and we wrote it like 3 years ago, I think, and we wrote it and we were very happy with it, but we realized we didn't know any other filmmakers really, and we hadn't really had any much experience doing anything on other than this like tiny little short film that we did together. So we realized we can't really make it. We don't have any resources or any experience to bring something like that through, and so we just put it aside. And then last year, as we were filming some films with our friends, then I realized that now I actually have found people in a crew and in cast that would help us and that would like to work with us again. And that's how we realized that now is the time when we actually are able to do it. And especially after filming Quadratura, which was such an ambitious project, which went very successfully, we realized that we can definitely take it a little step further and get into that feature film zone.
So what have been the challenges so far?
We had little minor challenges, like finding certain people for certain roles or tasks. But right now, our biggest challenge is just the funding stage, really.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much always the biggest challenge as independent filmmakers, because everything else has been going very smoothly. We have a lovely team. We have had all the like script reads and costumes are pretty much done for the first block of filming. We've had lovely locations, and we found all these things all these elements that are going to bring this film together. We even have found artists and craft makers who have agreed to create custom props or little details for sets, and some of them are doing it for free just because they really like the idea of the project, which is absolutely wonderful. But just that overall cost of the film is something that's a little bit challenging to cover, but we're working on it.
So are you going out crowdfunding, or how are you bringing that together?
So we have two approaches. One of them will probably work on a crowdfunding campaign as well, which will
it's going to come later.
Yeah, so we'll do a little bit of filming first. We're filming in November, and when we have filmed these, we're going to be filming one location, so all the scenes in this one location, and at least we will have some footage to show people what this film might look like with the main characters and everything, and then we'll be using that to get some more attention on what we can make here. And the other approach is just trying to find some more individual supporters, reaching out to some companies and potential investors.
Okay. So you said that you're going to do a little bit of filming. Is that around locally, or are you going anywhere specific?
It is kind of locally to us. Yeah. We'll be filming in Ringwood, and so we just found this lovely little cottage, and it looked very appropriate for the kind of aesthetic that we're going, a little bit vintage and not very modern, and in a nice quiet area, and so that's where we're starting to film.
Fantastic. So if If you had any advice for anyone that was going to move into, or who was interested in filming short films, or moving up to feature length, what would be your advice?
I'd say start small and progress big of every project, and just build up a strong friendship with the people around you.
Yeah. I was going to say literally the same things, just starting with small things, just do how many small little short films you need to do. Like our first films we literally did with crews of teams of 5 people, maybe 10 people maximum, and we filmed them in friends' houses or somewhere outside where we could just get to easily with barely any equipment or anything, just using our own props and costumes. And then slowly we were able to take every step a bit further with actually being able to make films with very specific looks and bigger teams. And yeah, and just for me personally, friendships on set are very important, and it's just very important to me that everybody feels good on the set and everybody has a good time. So I think
it's also a good sign if people want to come back and work with you again. Definitely. It means you're doing something right.
Yeah, because as I said, these people on Limerence, pretty much everybody on this team is somebody we have worked with before who have just easily agreed to just come back and work with us again, which is just very, very nice. And it feels so good that they trust us and that they would like to work with us again. And it just immediately creates this really close atmosphere on set that everybody gets along very well. And I think it really helps because you just have that support that people are willing to do something extra or to do something that maybe normally they wouldn't agree to do, but they just do it because you're also friends, and it really helps.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I mean, my experiences are the same really with the things that I do. You build up this group of people that you work well with, and you build up that mutual respect, and I think as you progress, you feel like you can do anything, really, can't you? Don't you?
Yeah. Definitely, yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like you've made compromises and you've made changes with the script and so forth to, as you said, make it a little bit more accessible. If money had been no object, do you think you would have still gone down that route, or do you think you might have gone for something a little bit big and more fantastical, or what you've developed is where you see the natural progression of the story? I'm quite interested in how you see that.
I think that's a very interesting question because like money restrictions sometimes makes you do changes, but sometimes those changes are actually for the better, because I do feel like the script right now is the best version it has ever been in.
Yes, because so much more in depth and so much more characterization.
Exactly, yeah, because before that I feel like you couldn't really connect to any character because there were so many characters, there were lots of things happening, and now I believe that the audiences will be able to really feel how this main character is feeling because we concentrate so much on her and it's so much more closed in. And to me personally, I prefer those kinds of films than where it's not so much about the big crazy spectacle and it's more about just how the story of this main character, and so I think that the story would still be around the same stage. Yeah.
I mean, the reason I asked that is because I was thinking of Pan's Labyrinth, for example, as a film, and it works as an allegory for mental health and all these sort of subjects that you're talking about, and isolation but set in an incredibly rich and vibrant, fantastic world. So when done well, you can still get the same. I mean, for me, I feel that that is a film that conveys all that stuff, but also in a world where you have this visual feast of another world but and it's talking about escapism and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I asked the question, really. So do you think you could still get the same impact if you did have the money? Would you have expanded it out to be more than it is, but it's interesting that you say that because of the limitations on funding, it made you think a little bit more about how you wanted the story to progress. So yeah, no, that's really interesting actually, because one of the criticisms I have of a lot of films is when money is no object, they do try and pack stuff in that is just doesn't really give anything to the story.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you explained it that way, because that's yeah, it's made me think actually.
Yeah, I feel like if money was no problem, the only thing we would be able to do is just develop that world we have created now, just with more customized costumes or props or anything like that, just to but the actual story, I think I would keep it as it is for now, because I think the whole development of the script really taught me to just that is sometimes to narrow it down and really focus on those main characters instead of adding details in somewhere else, which at least I personally really enjoy. So
brilliant. So what would you say your influences are for filmmaking?
Well, for this film specifically, Pan's Labyrinth actually was one of the lists of inspiration. We had quite a few just modern and also older dark fantasy films, like from the kind of aesthetic point, I was thinking of some of those Disney remakes that maybe I don't really like as much as stories, but from the visual point of view, like Maleficent, or some of the other more recent ones where it's like that fantasy world, but it's more dark and serious and a bit sinister, and that was always a big inspiration. And then for the actual story, it was always fairy tales from the Brothers Grimm, and just some mythology, and for example, we did lots of reading on the goddess Freya in which mythology was that? Germanic, or it's like called different in different places, but Germanic or Nordic, I think.
So Norse mythology as well.
Norse.
She was in.
And so lots of inspiration came from stories about her, and because she's like an actual character in the film, not really, we didn't create like a person for her, but she's mentioned, and the story is shaped around her being in this world. So I'd say those were the main inspirations for this film specifically, and for me personally as a filmmaker, I think my main inspirations are more films that are, again, concentrate more on the human story, on emotions, and are like I like to call them poetic, with lots of metaphors and symbols and visual symbols and audio symbols. Like, for example, I think one of my favorite films definitely would be The Tree of Life, which is just lots of beautiful symbols and metaphors, and that's kind of what I try to put in my films as well.
So, what would you say are the worst kinds of films? This is a little bit of a question. what would you say are films that you feel make mistakes or could be done better? And I'm talking about sort of mainstream films here. I know it's easy to criticize, hard to create, but just interested to hear what you think.
I think you have stronger opinions on that.
So films which have like not been made well. It's gonna sound weird, but the Fast and Furious franchise.
Yeah, more than likely. I've never seen one, so I've got nothing to say.
It started off as a film about street racing, undercover police, very realistic storylines, very realistic people.
I know Vin Diesel and the Rockers in the
Now it's gone into some secret agencies trying to save the world from like bioterrorists, and they're taking on like Russian terrorists as well.
You sound like someone who studied these films.
Unfortunately, I have, yes.
Okay, so Fast and the Furious. What else?
Yeah, just like franchises that forget what made them good originally and try to outdo themselves every time. And they just lose what made it great in the first place.
I feel like...
Sorry, go on.
yeah, for both of us, I think what we really don't like as much is the just sequels in general. I feel like sequels are such a lazy thing because they can be made nicely, but so often you can just feel that they just did it because the first one was successful and they just wanted to continue the same story, and just like massive franchises where the films just keep coming and coming, or remakes that also often makes me angry because it just feels like there's not enough original stories sometimes, and there definitely is, especially if you know where to look for. But for example, the local cinema we have concentrates more on the big blockbusters and the more the like popular films to I don't know, I guess that you can call them that, and for audiences like us, it just sometimes feels like there's nothing really much to watch, and we need to really go and look for something that's more original and more unique.
So if someone came and asked you for a film to make them happy, what would you pick?
To make them feel happy.
No, to be happy. Not make you feel happy, but to be happy. You know, a film that you'd be happy with. What would you say?
My film that I think is definitely something that is a good film just to make you feel happy in that moment, and also how to teach you to just be happy in your life, would be The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which I think is just such a beautiful film. It's when it came out, I didn't expect much from it. I just thought it was going to be a very simple, predictable film, but it's so heartwarming, and it has lovely messages, and it's also very, very beautiful. That was the thing that shocked me the most: the cinematography and the editing, and everything is just. I can watch the film over and over again, and it's just beautiful, and always makes me feel so much better.
Brilliant. So, lastly, going back to your film, which. What can people expect? What from the vision in your head? What can people expect to see, and what is it that you're hoping to really convey?
Okay, so this film is going to be definitely something for dark fantasy fans, for people who like those kind of folk tale inspired films. It references a few old fairy tale elements in some lines, or in some elements in the actual props or costumes, and it's just a film that concentrates closely on you wanting love, and you being scared of being alone and lonely, which I think is something at some point of lives pretty much everybody has experienced, and we have just made this very visual story around these feelings. And it's going to have lots of, as I mentioned earlier, visual metaphors of a character who's just so scared of being alone, and how far she's ready to go, and how this takes her through this stage of obsession, and how it pretty much drives her mad. And I believe that visually and also in sound and all these little elements that this film has, it's going to create this very enriching and atmospheric experience that will really pull the audience in, and will make them feel those kinds of feelings, and yeah.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully, excuse me. Hopefully it'll all come together. It sounds like you guys know exactly what it is that you want to build and create and show, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the filming that you do in November, and maybe later on during the filming process I can pop over and we can do more of a face-to-face thing and do some podcasts and things. I think that'd be really cool, because I'm really excited about it. It sounds amazing, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah. That's very nice to hear, because it's one thing, because I wrote this story, and obviously I've been living with this story for a long time as it's been developing, so it's one thing for me in my head just thinking, yeah, this is pretty great, and I love it, but then just the reactions we've had from all our cast members, from all the crew members, and just from strangers when I send them a little bit of information about it, and everybody always just says how they can't wait, and it sounds like something, because as I think the one successful thing about this is that it has those very relatable human kind of issues with this, as I mentioned, just wanting to have love and not being lonely and having this kind of drive in your life that you're ready to do anything for. And at the same time, it has all these fantasy elements and these very visual elements that are these two things that I think combine into something very enjoyable, hopefully.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, as I said, I'm really excited about it. I'm really looking forward to hearing more. Let's make sure we keep talking, and I'm sure we'll get lots of people sent your way, and get more people excited about it, because I really can't wait to find out more.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, just